And welcome back to another episode of the NWCA's MatStats show, along with Glenn Gormley and Kevin Hazard. I'm Jason Bryant. Today, we're going to dive into some more fun attendance stats and talk about the growth of wrestling. Again, Glenn Gormley, our resident statistician, Kevin Hazard, our resident scholastic expert, coaching extraordinaire, and veteran NCAA attendee. So we all have experience in attending these events in various shapes and forms and experiences. And today, Glenn, what's basically the, I guess, your thesis statement of today's show?
Okay, is this heaven? No, it's Camelot. That is how I'm describing what the wrestling, the NCAA and the NAIA are today, 2022.
So with that, we've got breakdowns of attendance, participation, all sorts of good stuff in here. So, Glenn, why don't you run over what Camelot is? Because normally, if this is heaven, it's Iowa, is the Field of Dreams reference that you point out here. But at the same point, we also know that Iowa has led the nation in Division I dual meet attendance since we've been tracking this thing. Well, at least in recent memory, they've really come on, especially rebounded in the Tom Brands era. But when you talk about wrestling attendance, you automatically default to Carver Hawkeye Arena.
Yes, it is a play on the famous movie Field of Dreams, and of course, hats off to Iowa, the defending champs and the attendance leader. This episode is going to deal with the number of men's wrestling teams, participants, and attendance growth. Everything is going well with wrestling in that thing. Men's wrestling is in a growth stage, and we'll dive into some specifics. But just to, we have more NCAA wrestlers than any time since 86-87 season. Attendance is up for the Division I championships and dual meets, and attendance per session for Division I wrestling is the same and has passed in some regards the March Madness basketball.
Yeah, and that's, again, per site, not necessarily in totality, but again.
Correct, it's per session.
Yeah, right.
And I want to take my hat off right now to Jason Bryant for the work he did on all the dual meet attendance. Could not have done this, any of the stats without his hard leg work there.
Yeah, and I actually got to give credit to some of the old the IWA guys. Denny Deal had been doing it for a long, long time, and then Alex Steen at the open mat for a year after he took over. And I've been kind of working with the SIDs to pick this up and kind of pushing them to put that attendance number in their releases and in their box scores. Some schools are better than others. Last year we had to wash everything out because there was very few places had any attendance whatsoever. So if we want to reference some attendance things, we can do that. Now, one thing I also want to point out too, folks, we have a growth state here, as Glenn's about to point out, but we're still looking to do better because historically we've only had 99 dual meets in college wrestling history draw over 10,000 fans. So keep that in mind as we talk about our growth potential and where we can grow, because we have plenty of room to grow.
Yes, we do. And I just want to let people know, especially people Kevin and I's generation, we sometimes romanticize about what it was like, but this show shows you that this is Camelot now. Okay. So the slide up on the screen right now, the NCAA men, this is men wrestling now we're talking about, has 28 more teams in 2022 than had in 2010. That's a big growth. Okay. It's a 22% growth from 2010 to 2022. We should be really happy with that. Okay. So what happened was the NCAA men's, hit a peak in the early 80s and then went down. But what a lot of people haven't realized is Moyer and so many other people have done so much for this that it's really rebounding now. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's interesting looking at the stats. You follow them down 81, and then it's still dropping in around 2000, kind of leveling off in 2010, and bang, it's on the upswing since. I mean it's a curve all the way across all the different D1, D2, D3, and I don't think it's the same in NAIA, but this is really interesting. I know a lot of guys my age think the sport, it's not what it was, but this is proof that it's actually really improving.
And what we have, too, looking at the historical research, and this is another side project that I've been working on for quite a while. As a matter of fact, I'll even pull this up right now. I've got a old Let's see. What year amateur wrestling news is this right here? This is volume 1961 that I have a bound version of that John Hoke sent me. So I'm going through all these amateur wrestling newses and the NCAA guides, tracking what schools had programs in what years, so we can get. So right now on this screen, you see 81, 82. The reason Glenn and I use this number a lot is that's the first year the NCAA tracked participation stats. So when we have there were 600 D1 schools back in the 70s. No, there were not. So because there were only 251 at the time that we started doing this. So the reason we use that date is because that's when they started tracking it. So one of the projects is going back through and finding out how many schools had wrestling in how many years, and were they impacted by Title IX? Were they impacted by, we're just doing this team for 2 years and then that was it? I think Birmingham Southern had the sport for 3 years. We count that as a casualty, yes, because they did have varsity wrestling. So one thing, again, to remember, and remember that historically, numbers weren't really well kept prior to the NCAA tracking records. So our official high watermark on NCAA schools is 81, 82, because we don't have any number that can actually validate anything higher than that yet. So that is on that will be a MatStats show when I go through 50 years of amateur wrestling newses and go year by year, or at least catch up to 81, 82. And also a reminder to Glenn, not to get off track too quickly, is we didn't have divisions until the early 70s, 1973, 1974, in that range. So everything before that was college. It was NCAA. So when Glenn uses NCAA as a stat, don't break it down to, what about just Division I? Yeah, that's the highest level of collegiate wrestling, but at the same point, NCAA is 3 divisions and thousands of member schools, and they are all pulling from the same pot. That being said, I guess have I got all the caveats out of the way yet, Glenn? You think we're good there?
Yes, you do, but I need to do one thing. That headline on this slide says 28. That was from 2019. It's now 47 more and 22% growth. That's why I said the 22%.
We had 40 new programs added across men's and women's wrestling in 2021 alone. So moving on.
Okay, so back to what Jason was saying about, our world history with stats really does start in 81, 82. But we have more NCAA teams right now than we've had at any time since 95, 96. Okay, that's something that I want everyone that goes to nationals or doesn't go to nationals, just a fan, to realize this is turning around. But just like Jason said, we still have a lot of growth to go. But let's remember right now, we're in a Camelot period. So I hope everyone sees that. Okay. If you compare, because we've had some issues with COVID and stuff all over the country, the world, et cetera, and that has hurt the NCAA upgrading their numbers. So this slide you're looking at here shows how many wrestlers we had in 2019 in the NCAA. It's 903 more than we had in 2010. That's 90 more full lineups. That's a staggering number.
Yeah, on average. Now, granted, we know that there's some schools are, the enrollment-driven ones. Some of them, when they first start, they struggle 5, 6, 7 athletes, and then they grow. You don't get 40 wrestlers on a team overnight. So also, remember, keep that in mind. That's a good average. That's a good way to look at it, too. It's like, so when you look at, how many people are listening? Well, 200. Well, that's not much. Well, put 200 people in a room. That's something. Put 90 full lineups in a room. That is a significant number, just even with the eye test.
Yeah,
Couldn't
that's
even
a way
fit in
of
the Northern Iowa Dome.
Yeah,
put that many matches on at a time.
Yeah, and there's been some talk, and you can see on the next slide that slide 6, that some people are saying, well, having women are going to hurt. Well, we mentioned this in past shows. Only one school, not the schools that were closed due to funding issues, only one school that had a men's team and a women's team dropped. Okay, and that was Minnesota Morris back in 2004. Okay, so the women's thing is helping us here. Once women's wrestling became copacetic with everyone started understanding it, the men's sport has grown. It's our best ally. Okay. So where does wrestling rank? We've showed this before. Men's wrestling ranks 12th. That was as of 2019. Now we're up to 264, but clearly we have not jumped into 11th place yet. Okay, but Hopefully one day we will here soon. Okay. The next slide is a very interesting slide here. This is of the top 12 men's sports. Okay. Only 2 sports have grown more than us since 2010. Okay. And that is indoor track and lacrosse, men's sports. Okay. So if you really want to look at it right now, guys, we are a sport that is a growing sport. We have a long way to go, guys, but we have a lot to cover here. That what we can do. We were losing teams, from 80, from 81 until, the turn of the century, but now we're in a different world here.
Yeah, and Glenn, I think one thing to remember is when you're talking to different generations here. So I'm 42 years old, so I start learning about the drops in the mid 90s, which was really the worst time, leading into 96 to I think 05 was a real bad run for drops. And you have to put your starting point. The people that wrestled back in Coach Hazard's era, we have to look at the different timeline. Okay, well, if you start back in 1964, well, your idea of growth, you're going to look at it, it's going to be downward. Well, if you've got to start at your new normal, we had to reset, and we did reset. So that's where I like you're pointing out to 2010, for example. That is when the rush really starts. So we have to look at a new point on the graph to say, where do we start our growth? Okay, if you want to go back in time when there was no women's wrestling, and you know what, there were a lot less men's sports also competing with the athlete base. We touched on that last issue on like other sports that were available. There weren't that many soccer teams back then. Well, now we got soccer, we got lacrosse, we got a lot more swimming programs, we got a lot more sports offerings at the collegiate level that are also impacting where our athletes who used to wrestle go. So again, remember, take into mind that the growth point is where we see that we're looking at growth versus what it used to be, because we can't go back in time and bring everything back. We have to find a new normal and a new start. And we look at the number of NAIA teams there are right now. We'll get to that in a bit. The almost 70 teams, and almost 60 of them were started post-2000. So something to consider when also looking at where your growth point starts.
Well, I think if you took that slide 7.5 and you did a bar graph or I don't know the name of the graph, but it would go like this. It would go. You guys can't see my finger.
If you're watching the video, you can kind of see.
You can see Kevin's head. Yes. It would go down and then start back up, and that would be right about 2010. Like that would be an interesting graph to take that and graph it.
Yeah, we're starting at the valley, going up the peak.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes,
back to Glenn.
exactly.
Back to our numbers guy.
Okay. The question people have asked me is, well, where will we keep adding these teams? Maybe teams that drop no longer want to have a team. Any interest in that? Okay, that's a very real possibility. But the number of NCAA members, teams, schools, okay, from when we start the numbers in the NCAA world in 81, 82 has gone up from 752 to over 1,100. It's an increase of over 360 colleges. Okay, it's almost a 50% increase. There's so many more schools that we can try to get wrestling teams at. This is a staggering number here. Okay, so once again, the youngest generation, the kids in school now, probably look at wrestling as a growth sport, where the Hazard Gormley generation has to come to grips with. We reset it in 2010, and there are schools out there that we can do that with.
And now, I think, Glenn, part of your generation, and you having been through the SEC, and Kevin having wrestled at a school known for its academics, that kind of is disappointing that it doesn't have a wrestling program anymore. Back in my home area, we get so hung up on the Alabama and the Auburn and the SEC schools, and like Georgia and Alabama, they didn't have teams for very long, so it's like there was no tradition there. Yeah, it was a name Power 5 school under today's parlance that once had a wrestling program. But to be honest with you, Wheaton College in Illinois was probably a better wrestling team. So we got to look at Well, these smaller schools, okay, well, they don't move the needle. Well, they don't move the needle in the terms of the bigger crowd or in terms of name recognition, but those opportunities are just as good, if not better, today at some of these smaller schools than they were at those named Power 5 schools that barely funded the sport for maybe a decade. So also something to consider.
Look at some of the greatest wrestlers ever. Bonomo, Chalice, Gray Simons, Baumgartner. They all went to small schools, okay? And, the Couve, all these, you can go on and on naming people that went to a lot of these small PSAC schools that were beating everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So very good point, Jason. The next slide here, this is where stats guys like to get cute a little at times and try to project into the future. Okay, the roster size is growing. I'll try to talk everyone through the math. And we now have 264 announced teams. So if you multiply that by the roster size from 2019, there's going to be about 7,900 wrestlers. The most ever NCAA wrestlers there ever were 8,500, almost 8,600. That was in 84, 85. How many schools do we need with the same roster size to pass that number? We need 288 schools. Okay. We have 264. Okay. So we need 24 more schools. Well, the way Moyer's been successful at this thing and everyone else who's helping him out, okay, we're going to be there in 3 to 4 years. I need to take Moyer to a casino one time because he seems to has a hot hand right now. Okay. And then once he hits, we'll start a team at William and Mary. We can do more than just battle for the belt. We can actually watch our kids wrestle.
Yeah, so, you get a team back at William and Mary. I can tell you where my local donations will go back to the school that pretty close to where I grew up. Not its little brother.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. So in other words, guys, this is 2022. My prediction here, guys, when we go to the Nationals in 2026, there will be more NCAA wrestlers than at any known period. Okay, and you can count on that, and you can ask me questions when you see me at Nationals or anywhere else between now and then.
I just wrote that down, Glenn. I just wrote down 2026 and I'm going to hold you to that because either way,
thank you.
I'll buy you a beverage one way or the other. All right, so I like that projection. I like that prediction too. Kevin, what do you think? 3 to 4 years? Wouldn't that be cool?
I think that's really legitimate. I mean, you're watching the growth, and we're seeing schools pick up wrestling, for a number of reasons. I mean, it's an easy sport to pick up. It helps the school out. I think we're heading in that direction. I'm not going to bet against Glenn.
I just want to know where this overwhelming positivity of the wrestling community has come from, because usually that's usually not been the MO. So moving forward.
But Jason, you mentioned reset, and I reset my life 11 years ago. So a lot of stuff restarted for me in that time frame, 2010, 2011. So maybe that's the reason I'm optimistic about it. But I'm looking at it, as we say here on Rocky Top, I'm looking at things through orange-colored glasses.
I went to Knoxville one time for a women's basketball game between the Lady Vols and that school in Norfolk, and I think I heard Rocky Top 37 times in an hour and a half. So if we could go ahead and never mention Rocky Top on this show ever again, I would be very grateful. Now, to the growth point here, the Division II, which as we have seen tremendous competition at that level. I mean, St. Cloud State has really kind of elevated their game. Central Oklahoma's having a tremendous year. By the time you watch this, now we're recording this slightly before our championships take place, you are going to have witnessed 3 of the best small school men's championships, the NAIA, the D2, and the D3, all happening prior to the NCAA championships. So those team races are going to be spectacular. In Division III, obviously, it's always Battle of the Bergs and who's going to sit there and chomp. The D2 wide open, has been wide open for the last decade. A lot of that, too, has been the growth of new teams moving in from the NAIA. We've got new programs starting up. We've got coaches from smaller programs that have been brought in and created, dynastic, if that's a word, I think, with St. Cloud State type of program. So there's a lot of competitive growth, and that is leading into new programs as well. So I want to see where you're going here with Division II, because I know this is going to be great.
Well, yeah, Kevin, talks to Moyer in the past more than I did, but Moyer used to call me up, 20 years ago, almost monthly, and say, what are we going to do about Division II? it looked like Division II was really falling apart. Well, the peak of Division II was in 1982-83 with 69 teams. Now we have 67. We had 68 briefly, but then Lindenwood jumped to Division One. They will jump to Division One.
Yeah, they announced that end of February, and that's a school that's gone NAIA, D2, D1, and another. To go back to our last episode, Glenn, what does Lindenwood have? They're a division. There'll be a Division I school with women's varsity wrestling. They will be the fourth.
4 now.
Now, asterisk, because we get this question a lot, like, what about Lock Haven? Well, Lock Haven's a Division II school with Division I wrestling, so not a D1 institution fully. So, yeah, I mean, that's an asterisk, but I just want to point out the Lindenwood thing moving to D1. Now, Division II really also had a low point when it comes to teams, Glenn.
Oh, my God, yes. Yeah, like Moyer was afraid, what would we do about Division II? And with the Haven situation, these other schools, you're grandfathered in sports. You can't just choose what sport's going to be Division I, II, and III. You're that division unless you've been grandfathered in, like Lock Haven, Clarion. Okay. Now, Kevin's been asking me a lot of questions about the NAIA. And Kevin, take over from here on the growth of the NAIA. Well, as you see, the NAIA.
I mean, it got down. It was at 19 teams, and it's grown and grown. And I mean, that's been the biggest part of the growth, for this century.
And Kevin, one thing I also want to point out:
growth in 20 years.
Yeah, a lot of you see on the screen there, Kevin. One thing I do want to point out too is, out of necessity, the NAIA created a qualifying standard for multiple entries, which has kind of also elevated them as a desirable place, because you can enter. It used to be you could enter 12, and they had an old system where you'd qualify based on a placement throughout the season. Now, at their regional qualifiers or conference qualifiers, you can enter 12 athletes. You can enter 2 at a couple weights. You can enter 2 at 5 weights. You can enter 2 at 6 weights. You can enter 12, and they have the right to qualify through. So, giving that opportunity for, okay, I'm not stuck behind a teammate, kids are less likely to say, all right, well, I'm going to peace out of here. Oh, I can wrestle my teammate in the national finals, and that has happened a couple times. So that is out of necessity to get more entries into the tournament. It has created a competitive boon for the NAIA, and the teams growing as well. They're almost over. They almost have more than Division I at this point.
Am I right that the women's teams have the same 12?
Yes, the women can enter multiple entries at their qualifier.
I think it's also 12, but I'm not positive.
At the NCAA one too, it is
interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we don't have.
An interesting thing on the NAIA as we look at the next slide. As of 2019, 88% of 4-year men's wrestling teams this century were started in the NAIA. The NAIA has done some great things. They have a motto: maximize your return on athletics. And they've really done great things with this.
Is that a budget issue, you think, Gorms?
Yeah, we'll get to that in one slide, Kevin. I jumped ahead there.
Okay.
But right before we get to that, if you look at the NAIA schools, all these that are adding, where are they all? Okay. 74% of NAIA schools with wrestling teams in 81, 82 left the NAIA to join the NCAA. And then the NAIA started other schools. So it's in some ways been like a kind of a feeder program to the NCAA. So everyone should be taking seriously all wrestling programs, not just the Division I. And as Jason stated, let's not get caught up on the SEC world. I mean, on football time, sure, let's just worry about the SEC. But this is wrestling, So, and Kevin, to answer your question, on the next slide, slide 15 shows the budgets. Okay. The median operating budget for the NAIA is $1.6 million. Division II is 3.4 and Division III 2.8. So you are maximizing your return on athletics. Then when you throw scholarships in there, NAIA does go above Division III, which doesn't have scholarships. But it's one reason why this is an interesting thought process on why we're going to raise teams And our next episode, where we'll get to later, we're going to dive back into this about a monetary situation with it. On where we can
Interesting
add
that
more
Linden, looking at this, it makes sense. Linden went NAIA to D2 with a bigger budget, and then on to D1. They're going to need more money to compete.
Yep.
And one thing too about Lindenwood to bring up, they have 30. I mean, I think I watched their press conference. Now they have 50 sports, and I say that because they have about 20 what they call student life sports, and some places call them club sports. But they have very organized club sports, which they call student life sports. Women's wrestling was part of that for a long time until being elevated to official varsity status, I believe, a year and a half ago. So, but with Lindenwood, they have used not just the wrestling has seen the growth of, we're adding a wrestling team to add enrollment. This is where Lindenwood, for example, has been just kind of like changing the game. They have 30-something sports that are varsity sports that are bringing in that many kids. The whole school is athletics centered, so they are actually using athletics as a front door, not just as a front door, but saying, hey, here's the front door. There's your room upstairs to the right, next to volleyball, next to bass fishing, next to all these other fun things. So, Lindenwood's really shown how you can, by adding athletics, you have created a brand, and to a point now, they're ready to make the jump to Division I. Now, that transition is going to be rocky, like every transition is, but let's also not forget California Baptist also started as an NAIA school, reclassified to Division II, and is now in their transition to NCAA Division I. So as far as going that NAIA to D1 route, it's a long route to take, and sometimes you've got groups of athletes that are going to be losing postseasons, but hopefully we can get the big blue disc to change the wait times for some of the non-revenue sports, because those are really who suffer the most. But that's another topic entirely. So we've got Lindenwood, tons of sports added, and their enrollment is their budget's up. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, and another slide showing the Camelot thing here is we've increased the number of collegiate wrestling teams just in 2021 alone by 35. That's a 7.6% growth. That's across all NAIA men, women, etc. Okay, but that is a huge growth, guys. Which help me predict that in 4 years we're going to have more NCAA men wrestlers than we've ever had before. Okay, now we talked about this on the women's show. Is there there where people can do it besides the increase in the number of schools? Yes, men's wrestling is the lowest percentage high school to college of all the top 12 sports in NCAA. So there are kids out there that, just like Jason and Kevin mentioned previously, that there's schools where these kids want to go to. And perhaps they go to Lindenwood or whatever other school because they have wrestling instead of going to my two schools or where Jason went that doesn't have the sport. This is a reason for them to go there. It could help enrollment a lot.
Kevin, I want to pitch this to you as a high school coach, because over the generations that have passed, when you're trying to guide kids that to go wrestle, that want to have that desire to wrestle and compete in college, the opportunities now at the smaller school level are greater than they've been in a long, long time, or if they've ever been, depending on where you set the point of progress. So what has changed over the years for you coaching that says, okay, hey, yeah, you want to go to Virginia. You want to go to Virginia Tech. We're using the Virginia schools here because that's where Kevin coached. Is okay, or do they want to go out of state? Do they want to go to Penn State? But what do you tell kids that say, you know what, you're probably better suited for, let's use current schools like a First Shenandoah or a Ferrum or something like that? How has that changed your mindset as a coach to put your seniors into higher education with that opportunity to compete?
Yeah, it's the difficult part is you've got a good high school wrestler, he automatically thinks he's D1 material. I think because there are so much more opportunities, I think they're seeing that, okay, but I can go to a D2 school and I can be competitive right away. I'm not going to sit on that. Brian's team, my son's team, he has two really good kids this year, and one's going D1, one's going D2. He's got a 3-time state champ that's going D2. And I think they're seeing, and they're, a lot of them are looking at education. I remember when I had a really good wrestler. He wasn't a D1 material kid, but he was a very bright kid. He ended up going to Gettysburg. And because we sat down, depending on the kid, you sit down and you look at it all the way across. Gettysburg, great academics, very decent D3 program. And so you just have to sit and you do it individually with the kids. And I think the coaches and the internet and everything else, they see more opportunities. I was kind of laughing when you were looking at the, John Hoke's 61, amateur wrestling news. Well, when I was in school, that's the only news we got. I mean, you waited for amateur wrestling news to come out to find out what happened. You know it instantly now, and I think that's helped the growth of those other divisions. They know what all the other divisions are doing now.
To that point, let's go back in time. Glenn, you were talking about full rosters. Well, back in the day, there were full rosters at these schools. There's full rosters now. So on this page, how it was reported, there's the aforementioned Auburn. Then there's Hampton-Sydney. There's Western Maryland, which is now McDaniel. There's Pfeiffer. There's, Sewanee, University of the South. There's Colorado, Oklahoma. I mean, these are even back then, the schools, no matter what size, were on the same page. So you were still seeing those names, and that name recognition with wrestlers I also feel is important. And Kevin, to your point about the internet, you will be able to pull up and watch the NAIA D2, D3 championships from your living room, from your phone, from wherever during the month of March. So access is there. So it's no longer, well, my kid's gonna go up to Johns Hopkins. I don't know if I can make it to Baltimore that often. Well, guess what? Pretty much everybody's streaming their stuff now. So yeah, let's get those excuses out of the way. But Glenn, where are we at now?
Okay, where we're at now, the next slide, 718, it shows another thing where the whole enrollment-driven situation is good. The U.S. college enrollment has gone down from the last decade 6%. And if you add now with the COVID situation, more students are going to online, University of Phoenix, what have you. Okay, this makes wrestling even more interesting and more likely to add the wrestling teams across the country because it's an amenity to get people to go to that school. Wrestling is in a good situation with that right now. Now, the next thing we're going to do too is we're going to dive into the attendance things, and we're going to start with the NCAA championships.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to go full screen on this if you're watching the video here, because Glenn's color-coded this as a stoplight. So I went full screen on my screen, not on your screen. So we'll go there. Okay. We'll hit that. So now that's maximized for you.
There you go. So what it does is, for whatever reason, 1976 was the year that wrestling and basketball started keeping per session attendance. Okay? We have risen 533% since then. And you can see on the white column, the white column on the right, you can see where all the high numbers have been very recent years. We're also 47% over the mean of that time, which means it's not just happening randomly right now. What has happened is in 97, you see, was the record. We had it at the Unidome, which was the biggest arena we had. And now we're having it bigger arenas. Since 2000, we've had it at professional basketball, hockey arenas, and we've really grown attendance. And this is interesting. I mean, it's now 18,000 people per session, and you see the finals are just high 18,000s. Pretty much everyone who goes to the finals is coming to session one. These are serious fans with this. So the question is then, and this is where Jason has come in huge, well, how does this translate for dual meets? You'll see on the next slide, okay? And the next slide, I color-coded. I'm a finance guy, so black is good and red is bad, okay? So red is stuff below 100% of the mean, and black is above. We are right now 157%. The number one attendance score above what it was in 2002. We are rising drastically. The reason 2016 has that asterisk that year is Iowa wrestled a home match before the football game in Kinnick Stadium. So that's still the record crowd. That's why that's skewed a little bit. However, guys, so you say, okay, is it just working at Iowa land? You go to the next slide. Okay, this is the number 5 attendance on the next slide. Okay, that is up 139%. Okay, and as you see, all black on the right except for 2 reds in this past 8 years. Once again, in 2017, there was an outdoor match. Rutgers hosted Princeton before the Rutgers-Penn State game. I was at that match. It was a huge crowd. Okay, then you say, well, what about the number 10 team? Well, the number 10 team is up also. It's up even more, 161%. Okay, now granted, these are low numbers, so they're easy to skew. But it's not just the Wrestling National Championship or the Iowa of the world or Penn State. It is really schools that we can do it. And not all schools keep attendance because they don't all charge, et cetera. So it is hard to go all the way down the line and do that. Okay. Now, the next slide 7/20/23. 7 of the top 26 dual meet attendances have happened this season. Now, something could have happened in the last week to bump it up to 8. I don't know. Okay. But when I did this research, it was 7. That is staggering. And then you see, now, of course, 2021, you can't count because of COVID. You weren't allowed to have it. But most of the recent years is when all the attendance has been happening. It is Camelot, guys, for the attendances. Okay.
And to Glenn's point there, too, we also need to point out that, yes, Iowa does play a huge role in this because they did sell out the season 14,905 each time. Now, that's tickets sold. Now, granted, were there 14,905 in the stands every single day? Well, any sporting event, it's going to be like that. So you say sell out, well, you're not going to be able to get tickets because they've all been sold. That's where the number comes from. Yeah. So, of course, Bryce Jordan Center was a match for Penn State this year. So those are the 7 for this season that we've got. Now, in the past, we've seen the growth of the attendance. So using 2002 as an example, because that's when Denny Deal from the Lehigh University Wrestling Newsletter started tracking the attendance. And we looked at it and started going, well, then there was like 8 teams that averaged 1,000. Believe the last year I did attendance, there were first time in history, there were 24 teams that averaged over 1,000 per dual meet. Now you say 1,000, that's not much. We sell out the Nationals. Well, yeah, we've got to start at what's our baseline? First of all, we should be putting 5,000-6,000 in every single home meet, no matter what, depending on the size of the facility. That's on us to get to the arena. But the fact that we went from the number 8 ranked team having 995 fans to the number 25th team having 995 fans makes a huge difference. It shows more people are showing up for the dual meets. We still struggle on getting those big crowds at Cliff Keen, at the Scuffle, at Midlands, events where we should have huge crowds because they're NCAA type matches. The Big Tens and the NCAAs are our big tournament draws. So, again, those are more or less, Glenn, you can correct me if I'm wrong, those are more of our outliers when it comes to tournaments. It's the Nationals.
Correct.
We need to look at the duels and see where is our fans. And now if we total them all up, we have enough wrestling fans to have, say, a dual meet championship and not people have concern about, we can only travel once. Because I'm pretty sure if you total all those average fans and put them into one arena, it's going to be a lot bigger than the Scott Trade Center or Enterprise Center or Little Caesars Arena where we're coming up on. So something to consider. We need to get to dual meets, folks. That's my preaching point for this episode.
Yes,
agree on the dual meet. Do you think, and this is probably not in the stats, that the fact that the NCAAs are televised more than one round now has really helped hardcore fans get more interested in wrestling?
I don't think it's that. My thing is I think it's getting wrestling, people that were already kind of interested in wrestling to cross over. I will use this as an example. So back when Brian had me come down to Robinson to announce the Virginia State tournament, Nick Simmons was ranked number 1 in the country for Michigan State. He got upset, and I'm like, holy crap, Nick Simmons got beat. Now I'm at the Virginia High School State tournament. sitting at the head table, and the person next to me goes, "Who's Nick Simmons?" And I'm like, "He's number 1 in the country, Michigan State." "Oh, I don't follow college." This is where I think we're getting the benefit from the streaming and the television and the ESPN Plus and everything that's on Hulu and Flow and what's on track and all that extra visibility is we've got wrestling people that never really followed college wrestling discovering wrestling on TV. I think that's the problem in my world has always been the crossover from the high school fan doesn't automatically become the college fan. So that's where I think it's not the new fan that we're getting. I think it's the fan we had that we were exposing them to higher level of wrestling, which is giving us better viewership at the NCAAs and the Big Tens and these big dual meets, because then you can get your whole team and sit there and watch Iowa Penn State on a 45-inch flat screen. Oh, let's be clear, on an 80-inch flat screen, and you can actually make fans out of those people. So the next time those 14 to 20 guys and girls that were watching wrestling at your coach's house, they will watch it on their own. So that's where I think the streaming and the technology has really helped bring the fans in. It's from our own people that were wrestlers, but we didn't have them at that next level. So that's my opinion on the topic.
Yeah, I agree with that. And one more slide here. It shows of all the top 26 dual meet attendances, they've all been Big Ten. And Big Ten hosted by Big Ten schools. And 2 of them were outdoor, the one at Rutgers and the one at Kinnick Stadium we mentioned earlier. Okay, now let's switch over to what this is one reason why I say we're in Camelot now.
Yeah, let's go back. Let's go full screen just so you can see it. Blow it up if you're watching at home, folks.
Thank you, Jason. So what happens here is in March when we have our tournament, we're the only 20,000 people who aren't watching March Madness basketball, it seems. Now, you can track on this thing from 76, once again, when they started keeping attendance, where we had 2,800 people per session. Now we have 18,000. Basketball is also from 11,000 to 19,000. What has happened here is we have closed the gap with basketball and actually passed them if you control for the basketball Final Four and regional finals that are in football-sized facilities, because then they can draw a lot more people. This goes back a little bit to what I was saying on the previous show, that it would have been great if we had it at the Minnesota Vikings football stadium where we could have seen how many people we could get. However, if you control for football, for the Final Four, the last 4 years, the men's wrestling Division I championship per session has outdrawn men's basketball. Now, granted, there's a heck of a lot more sessions in men's basketball because there's so many more games. There's like 34 sessions right now per year where we have 6. However, when you watch some of those first-round basketball games, like Jason said, they might have 16,000 fans there, but there's only 4,000 people actually there. Okay, corporations bought them, whatever. Okay, so we can look at this right now, guys, and say we are almost equal with basketball, 18,000 to 19,000 per session. But when you control for Final Four, we draw more than them. That is something I want everyone to understand at the Division I tournament coming up in Detroit, that there's more people there every session than are going to be at the average session in college basketball. Now, let's go to the next slide. What would have happened, and of course, no one wishes what happened in the past 2 years with COVID. What happens if that did not happen? As of February 26, 2020, we had 35,000 all-session tickets sold. Let's say nobody else would have bought them and nobody would have walked up. That means we would have had 210,000 fans. The best Final Four ever, 2 semifinal games and the final game, 2 sessions, was 153,000. We would have blown that away. The best per session men's basketball tournament ever was 22,000. We would have 35,000, 57%. Now, if we add, like my idea to add women to that also, God knows how many people we'll get. But guys, this is the Camelot we're in. that this is just such a staggering number. It's one of these things until you do the research, and crunch the numbers, it's just hard to imagine. Okay. That is, if we would have had the Viking Stadium, we would have had the next slide, Jason. We would have had an 85% increase in total attendance, which equals per session attendance. We would have had an 85% growth over our best year ever. How nice would that have been? How many more people would have gotten the chance to see that? That is just such a staggering thought on that, guys. Now, well, where are these other sports at that? Okay, the sport we all hear more about than anything, especially if you live, sorry about this, Jason, but on Rocky Top, like I do. Okay. I told you I couldn't promise. Division 1A football attendance has at its lowest per game attendance since 1981. Michigan and Cincinnati, that made the playoffs this year for the first time ever, saw a drop in their attendance from 2019 because you can't count 2020 because of COVID. Okay, so we are up 2.5 times the attendance since 81, since that happened. So wrestling is going through something that football and basketball are not. We are getting the word out to people. Okay. So these other sports might be losing, but we're not. Okay. Now, granted, we have the V-shaped curve we're talking about that went down to 2010, and we don't really have a lot of attendance figures that Jason and Danny Deal did at Lehigh since a certain date. But we are really in a good time right now, guys. It's a great time to be a wrestling fan. And one of the better things about being a wrestling fan, we don't have to weigh in Detroit.
Yeah, I'm out. I'm out on weigh-ins.
Yeah. So we're all out on weigh-ins, and that's fine. So, guys, let me hear what you're thinking about this, and then we'll say what we're doing next month. Excuse me.
Well, you know me. I've been an advocate for getting to dual meets, getting to, if you live in Iowa City, go to Mount Vernon and go see Cornell College. If you live in Baltimore, or get to Johns Hopkins. If you live in Southwest Virginia, get to Roanoke, get to Ferrum. There's so many. If you just draw, where you're at and draw a map, you're going to find a college wrestling team. Probably. Now, there's some parts of the country that there's open spaces of nothing. But you're going to find a college wrestling team. And if you've got the ability to take a couple kids, to take some, fill up the car and carpool, save some gas on that because it's a little pricey right now. Go on down and check out, say, University of Jamestown if you live in central North Dakota. Or go, if you live in Fargo-Moorhead, you've got Minnesota State Moorhead. You've got Concordia. You've got North Dakota State. You literally can find a college dual meet. Just throw a rock in any direction, you're going to find one. So what's so wrong with going to see teams that you don't know? Maybe you become a new fan. Hey, there's that kid from my high school, or my friend's cousin's daughter's brother's former roommate. Goes and wrestles at McDaniel. Let's go down there. So there's so many reasons to go. Stop coming up with reasons not to go. We're always going to do well when it comes to the postseason national championships at the Division I level. But I'm going to Wichita to announce the NAIA championships. I'm going to Cedar Rapids to announce the Division III championships. What, you live close? Guarantee you there's going to be seats, so get down there and watch it. You can keep up with the D1 conferences that on your phone as you're sitting there. Contribute to the wrestling economy, contribute to the wrestling, I guess, the World Wrestling Fund, whatever you want to call it. I don't even think that's a thing, but just that whole general thing of realizing that you're allowed to go to wrestling that you're not directly tied to because you like wrestling. Coach Hazard, your turn.
I was thinking the same thing. We go to the NCAAs and we go to watch the wrestling, but the attendance there is more. I see all my friends, really good friends, once a year there. That's as much a party as anything else. The other part, I was exactly what you're saying. Go watch a high school match. Go watch a college match. Get involved with your college nearby. Me, it's George Mason. I get out as much as I can. It's just where we can help as fans. is to build the numbers, the dual meet attendance. And a dual meet is so much better than a tournament in that you're there for 2 hours. You're not there for, you go watch a high school tournament. A lot of times you're there 6-7 hours. And if you're not a really, really hardcore fan, that's tough. You're going because you're watching your son, or in my case, my son's team. And so go watch. It's amazing. It's 2 hours. It's fun. And a lot of these coaches have done a really good job. Do presentations? They do half times. It's really improved. Get out and do it. Couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, Jason, I love what you say. I'm lucky. Right up the road for me is King University, and they're going to compete for the what's not called the NCAA Women's Tournament yet, but they're compete for that title. I'm going up to see him at Adrian College in Michigan this weekend. I think it's going to be fun. All right, guys, let's do this. The next show is Wednesday, April 20th, 2022. We are going to explore a possibility to grow wrestling even more. We're diving into the strengths, weakness, opportunity, and tactics of having a limited scholarship conference in Division I. Okay? Football did this in the early 80s when they did Division I AA. I've done a lot of research on that. Keep an open mind on this, people, on this next show. We'll see you guys then. And from my other host, Jason and Kevin, this is Glenn Gormley. See you next time. We're going to have fun in Detroit, guys. We're in Camelot.
See you in Detroit.
See you in Detroit, guys.